Hey, Sergio here, Max Business Profits. I'm here again with Rick Koyman from Trade Secrets Inspections. Uh, as you've heard me say in the past, Rick is probably one of the best, well qualified, thorough home inspectors I've ever met. And coming from a guy who flips houses, who used to flip houses on a regular basis, I can't tell you how important it is to have a good inspector in your pocket. In our last episode, Rick was talking about the difference between being in one organization or another and being qualified through these organizations as a home inspector. And Rick actually belongs to an association, FABI, which FABI is actually less than 3% of the home inspectors here in Florida. So it's a higher bar, it's a higher requirement, and a more thorough inspection, I would assume. So going from there, we're going to talk about the properties themselves, and a lot to say about that because Florida is not an older state when it comes to developments and housing and building. It's a newer state. Most stuff here is less than 40 years old, which by comparison to the rest of the country, it's pretty young. So Rick, why don't you get right into talking about properties by age? Tell us what the deal is. I mean, old, new, pre 2003. I know there's some code stuff you want to talk about and get into. Go ahead and take over.
Awesome. Great to be with you again, Sergio. Yeah, let's delve into this issue on properties and what's the difference between new old and what is new versus old, and how is it different here in Florida than what is more commonly known. And we see a lot of people coming down here from all over the country, and they bring their presumed what they've lived with for the last 30 years, and that's what they know, and it's a different world. The biggest thing I can say to everybody out there in regards to house age and what's the biggest deal, and the question is on everybody's mind as soon as you own property, is how much does my insurance cost?
Right.
And yeah, that's this is basically what it is to be a Florida property owner. Is it's expensive nowadays, and it's basically only going to get worse as weather changes and these claims keep coming. And as the insurance companies are being made to write these checks, they're going to keep making it harder and harder on getting the policies. So it all goes hand in hand. But we see people come down here all the time, and they're looking at a 1985 or 1991, and there's an assumption that it's been taken care of. It should still be older, but I don't mind the way the old stuff looks, and as long as it works, it'll be fine, right? And to some extent that is true, but to a greater extent, things age a lot differently down here. For one, a big part of that is our water and what the water does to the materials, and another big part of it is related to water, but it's really humidity and temperature. And those two things together will basically dissolve everything
So
into.
when you say the water, like are you talking about like the water that's in the city water system or the
Yeah, both.
well, the wells?
Yeah, whether you're getting it out of the ground through a well or you're getting it from the city that's been treated, it's all still pretty hard water. It's all got a lot of contaminant in it. It's all very rough on the materials that are build the faucets and the pipes, and that
Interesting.
these things don't hold up like they used to.
Right.
So
Probably
what
by
used
design.
to, well, yeah, a big part by design and by cost of materials to produce. But there's this concept that this stuff used to last 20 years and now it only lasts 5, and that's really the truth. It does. It doesn't very. There are quite a few products out there nowadays that are 5 to 8 year products, and they're big dollar things. They're hot water tanks.
Sure.
You know, it's not a 25-year unit anymore. But more importantly, what I wanted to talk about is how relative age on the market and what people are looking at can be thought of as you're shopping. And you can do this from your desk at home in Kentucky, wherever you are, I don't know. But if you don't know why it matters, then you just look at everything the same. And here in Florida, there's been some that have happened that have made things change that didn't occur in the rest of the world or the rest of our country. And mostly it's due to storms. It started in the early 90s. We had Hurricane Andrew came through and changed the way that South Florida saw what Mother Nature could do.
Yeah.
And it started in Miami-Dade counties. And they said, we got destroyed. We can't let things go back to how they were. We have to do something better. And they determined that they needed to separate themselves from the rest of the residential building code, which everybody uses, and create something better. That was acceptable, but we need more than that. So it's not that there's less; it's we're meeting that and then a whole bunch more. So it's the Florida building code. And back in the 90s, it was actually the South Florida building, and the state of Florida didn't adopt it. They didn't actually adopt it till 2001. And
What took them so long?
Politics, cost of things. It's basically just the insurance industry leveraging things, and they weren't making payouts at that point. There was huge growth going on, so there was this big building boom happening.
Nice.
So there was revenue coming in.
Like growth and pay for everything.
Yeah, and that was the good times. But when it went to the bad times, then things changed, and they changed their attitude about that. So in the early 2000s, like I said, in 2001, Florida as a state said, "Hey, this thing that Miami did seems to be working out for them, and it seems to make sense. So how about we take that South Florida building code and make it the Florida building?" And they did, but they didn't enact it till 2002 to just make things more complicated, I think. But so here's the bottom line. If you're looking at a property in Florida and it was built prior to 94, it has no Florida building code to it at all because it didn't exist. It's just built like everything else was. And some of them were built good. They knew they were on the coast and they were, well-built homes. And that's great, but those are few and far between. For the most part, they were just building stick houses like they built them everywhere else, and that didn't make it. So in 97, it got a little better, but it was mostly down in Miami and Dade and Broward counties that it improved. So really the cutoff line that people should reference is 2002, right? So if you're looking at property in Florida and it's built before 2002, it is very much built differently.
So, wouldn't a lot of that be just based on local jurisdictional rules and stuff like that? Like, my house was built in '92. I didn't build my house, but I'm fairly secure in feeling that my house is well built. Now, of course, it's a block home, which is a completely different breed of animal than a stick home down here. But weren't local jurisdictional building rules kind of pretty good back then? Good enough, let's say. Look, we can debate.
It's not that the code was fine, but it wasn't specific to wind resistance and uplift loads and stuff like that.
The Miami-Dade
and the products that were used weren't manufactured with those things in mind. So you're built well, and they knew enough to put straps on the trusses, but did they put the straps appropriately on them? Did they use the right fasteners? Because at the time that was just going above and beyond and just doing stuff that made sense, right?
Right.
And that was great on those small build, one-off homes, but the inner city tract stuff, that didn't occur so much. And those houses have been retrofitted, and that's why we have the My Florida Safe Home program.
Right.
We do the wind mitigation programs. These are all retrofit programs to upgrade these older homes to meet some of these requirements, to resist these storms, to meet the wind resistance and the windows and the roof stay on.
And quite honestly, up until Hurricane Andrew, even here on the West Coast where we are in Naples, We hadn't seen a hurricane, what, 2 decades at
Yeah,
least?
it was a very long time,
The
right?
last time anybody talked about a real hurricane down here was Hurricane Donna, and that was in the 60s.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really what's changed is it was,
Yeah,
a once in a decade event, if that, I mean,
right.
and that was a lot. And now it's more like in every other year, kind of.
Yeah,
We're going to
unfortunately.
see heavy tropical storms. You can count on it every year. I would expect you
Sure.
to.
Yeah, well, things are shifting.
And every year now they make it even better. So every 3 months the city is updating the codes, and the newer stuff is far superior than the older stuff. It just simply is. I mean, and
Yeah.
and it goes back to the manufacturing side of things, where they now have protocols, they now have testing standards, they've been through it enough, they've written the checks enough times to say, hey, this is what we need to pay attention to. Let's make sure we build these products that actually can resist this stuff. So when you're looking at those early 2000 homes, when they were just implementing these techniques, and the early 2000 building boom was pretty big down here,
Yeah.
it was pretty kind of shotgun style building, and a lot of the stuff was done poorly, and it doesn't meet the requirement. It's there, but it wasn't done correctly, and it
Yeah.
doesn't meet the requirement, and
Well,
it's
I think you and I would
expensive
both
at this point.
you and I would both agree at this point. I mean, the codes have changed, but we're seeing a lot of shabby workmanship anyway. I think
Oh, for
that's
sure,
human nature to
for
cut
sure.
corners and do whatnot. I mean, that's all great. Yeah, the roof will stay, the trusses will stay on the
Mhm.
blocks, but everything else going on in between the walls sometimes are just not. That's just a function of being human. So okay, so you've got your pre 2003 code, you got your pre 1992 moving it, beyond what 2003 to 2007 type of thing. Where
Yeah,
we're
in 2007, there was substantial changes made again because between 2005 and 2007, Florida got hit several times by storms, and they said, "Wow, we really need to get the industry on board of this meeting this code," and they really improved the product quality. So 2007, things actually started to get better, right? So when we're looking at houses, if it's, pre 2010 in my mind, when I go out there, I'm looking for specific things to make sure that those codes were done and those specific things were met because they weren't thought of as much at that point.
And that brings up a great point that I want everybody to understand. You've got home inspectors down here because I know a bunch of them. They've been inspecting homes for only a couple of years. They do not know what it's supposed to look like or what to look for some of the stuff that isn't up to code beyond, when you're going further back. So I'm,
And
I'm definitely
this is a great comment. It
yeah,
brings up something that just occurred today. It was really interesting. And this is the perspective thing again. Like
yeah,
I was out to do an inspection, and the customer wanted to have a roofing contractor come out and check the roof because they had big concerns about the roof. And that's fine with me. I'm perfectly okay with you do what makes you comfortable. I'm perfectly qualified to do it for you. That's fine. But what I'm getting at is when the roofer got done telling him about how he viewed the roof, what he didn't know was how what he does as an industry is seen by the insurance industry because they don't deal with that side of it. They're gone. It's after the fact that these insurance documents get filled out, and they don't know it until they themselves get the letter for their house about their roof, and they're like, "What are you talking about? All this and that and the
interesting.
other thing." But this is the point: is the industry people aren't being exposed to what is relevant to the homeowner in regard to their specific industry.
Right, right. It's one thing to say, yeah, your roof is pretty good, but it's another thing to say, okay, according to the insurance company, here's what it's lacking, or here's what it needs,
Right, exactly.
and that affects the price of the
And
insurance
and
policy.
that
And in many
is
cases, whether or not they pay out, right?
and there you go, exactly. So you have that you have that coming from the so-called expert, the certified license holder in that industry is lacking that knowledge. So you think the average inspector knows it? I can promise you that those guys that are just getting started, they don't.
For sure. For sure. Way interesting stuff there. So, okay, you brought up roofs. So we're going to talk about like the useful expected lifespan or cycle of some of these products. Let's start at the top. I mean, roofs. I mean, I go through this too. Like with my roof, I mean, I buy a 30-year shingle. Am I getting 30 years out of that shingle? Well, probably not, because Florida is like Mars, right? But the insurance company, is saying, oh, no. Here's how we're going to do this. We were just talking about this in the network group today. And as a matter of fact, I referred you to a bunch of people in there because they were like, well, I'm not really sure why is my insurance company telling me I only have 3 years left of life on my 20-year shingle roof that I only bought 5 years ago, or some crazy like that, right? And I'm like, you need to talk to someone that has this down pat.
Yeah.
Lay on it, Rick.
That's what I call Florida math.
Yeah, Florida math. Yeah,
and it's definitely related to the roof. Oh my God, this gets really deep into the weeds, because when we're asked to predict life expectancies for the insurance industry, like they want to know, when you go out and look at this roof, do you expect it to be here in 5 years, 10 years? They want to know these things, but it's very hard for us, how am I supposed to see into tomorrow and know that, right? So there's reference charts, because that makes everything easier, right?
Like actuary tables.
Right. But now we have different places to get reference charts from, and they have different numbers on them. So you get different answers from different people depending on what chart they're going to use. But what it comes back to is the underwriter. And the underwriter's always going to pick the lowest number, right? They're always going to pick the smaller number.
About mitigating risk.
If I say the roof has 5 to 10 years on it, they don't hear 10. They hear 5.
Correct.
Right? And if they hear 5, from their perspective of risk, they're only going to want to bet on that roof for 1 more year.
1 more year, not 5.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, this is what I was trying to explain.
This is Florida math, right? Yeah. So this is where you got a 30-year roof product, right? The chart says it's only going to live for 25 years because it's in Southwest Florida, and it's a pretty harsh environment, and that's reasonable to say that things age quicker. And then someone else has to predict a life expectancy. So you pick a window, right? It's going to be, in this realm. Well, the realm doesn't exist. Only the little number exists in the insurance person's eyes. They don't live in the realm. They live in the risk.
Right.
So yeah, the roof age matters. But here's where it gets complicated, because you can go out here and you can buy a product. You can buy a metal roof product. A clay tile roof is an 80-year roof product, right? Everywhere else in the world, they're like, what do you mean? That's a stone. It'll last for 150 years. It's, slate roof, right? No, because the roof that we're talking about isn't that one. We're talking about the one that's just under that one, which everyone refers to as the underlayment. That in Florida is your primary roof covering. That material is only going to live 20 to 25 years.
Right. So it doesn't matter what the
right. So
not the substrate, but the media.
This is where the argument gets really weedy, because now I have a good 35-year-old metal roof that's got no issues except for the age. And the insurance industry in the past used to say, well, we have this great roof certification program. We're going to send out a qualified person to come out and evaluate the roof and then give us an expected useful life based on their professional opinion of that. Well, not really anymore, no. Because they're just going to look at the chart, and the chart stops at 25, 30 years. And at that point, the conversation's over.
So, in essence, what you're saying is, if we were going to insure somebody for their shoes, we wouldn't be looking at their shoes, we'd be looking at their socks. Depending on the quality of the socks, will tell us how well the feet are going to hold up because, right? Because, I mean,
Yeah,
look, I mean, shingle and the slate and all that stuff doesn't stop the water. We know that, right? That's not what it's for. It's for decorative purposes and maybe hail and stuff like that. It's what's underneath that
right.
stops the water
Right,
from.
and that's because of the storms, right? And
Right.
that's the question people from up north always say. Well, what are you talking about? I've been a roofer all my life up north. Of course, a shingle roof is a waterproof layer. If you put it together correctly, of course it is. Well, that's true until it gets 140
100
mile
miles.
wind blowing on it, and then it's not in the same configuration anymore. So
Right.
it's not waterproof. The waterproof layer needs to be the one that's underneath that. And what happens when that covering fails due to that exposure? We're trying to minimize that water intrusion because we expect that to occur. So this is where it's different down here, right? We do things differently, plain and simple.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. Imagine there's something to be said there about windows as well.
Oh, absolutely. Oh my gosh. Not only is it about the glazings, but I mean it's everything. It's not just the glass that is approved and tested, it's the frame. So there's approvals for frames, there's approval for glazings, and then there's approval for the fasteners, right? And oftentimes the attachments are so involved that the average crew out there, they're not even paying attention to such things.
Right. They're
Right?
not that sophisticated.
Because what was in what we call the TAS or the testing standard, right? The testing application standard, because there had to be a program to assess things by. They said, well, we bolted this thing in with 6-inch screws that went 5-inch into a substrate, and we put them on 12-inch centers. Did you do that?
More or less.
Yeah, more or less.
Right. More or less.
Yeah, well, we used the
12 here,
screws
15
and
there, whatever.
yeah, but I mean, nowadays, these things are getting done much better nowadays. But these are the things that in the past weren't done that way. We never used a 6-inch screw putting windows in. We always used a 3-inch Tabcon.
Right.
That's
Right.
not that does not meet the testing standard.
Well, I was reading something not that long ago, or somebody had said it to me, and I can't remember the exact percentage. It was somewhere like 90, where they were saying 90% of most of the water intrusion in a home is going to be around the windows after a storm. I don't know how accurate that was, but
It
it was
depends
something.
on the windows and how it's done, but yeah, again, and they're getting better at this because they're absolutely right. For the longest time, we built a masonry wall, right? And then we shoved a window in the hole,
Walking
and
around
then
there.
we put sealants all around it, right? But the masonry was still masonry. It was still porous,
Of
right?
course, right? Right.
And yeah, there's always elevated moisture, we call it, around windows because of that. So now the newer thing is if you look around and you drive around, you'll notice that around all the windows, they're sealed. They're painting. There's a sealant put on the masonry. It's a
Yeah.
waterproof. Then
We
you
have to. You have to
right.
get
So
stuck. Yeah.
right. So these are the things that get changed. These are the updates that happen because yeah, absolutely. The windows, the older windows that don't seal well, for one. Yeah, think about 100-mile-an-hour wind separating the seals between the two windows, and yeah, of course, water's going to go right through it.
And that's what people don't realize too in a storm. I mean, I've been down here enough to see enough of them. The water doesn't come straight up and down. You
No,
know, I
no,
don't
what
think
we
I've
have
seen
is
a single
wind-driven
storm yet.
rain.
Yeah, it's I never sideways, and that's
Yeah.
just picture a fire hose up against the window.
That's what you got to think about when you're
Yeah,
actually assessing how do you think this is going to handle it. Seriously, think about
yeah,
how it's going to sit there and take a tremendous amount of water like a fire hose for a few minutes because yeah, it's abusive. It's a big deal.
yeah. Not to mention, you're talking about that same fire hose blowing up the shingles and and
Right.
whatnot. And I don't care what you say, you can have
And
slip or
here's the
whatever. Water's gonna
right.
find a way to get in.
Which you need to understand in a high wind situation, when the wind is gusting over your roof line, you have a lower pressure inside than you do
That's
outside. So the
right.
house is literally like a balloon trying to expand. because of the lower pressure.
Right.
So not only is it expanding, but the lower pressure is now a vacuum. It's pulling those things in, as well as the wind penetrating and pushing it in, because it is truly in a lower pressure situation. So you're literally sucking the roof off the house is what happens in a hurricane.
Okay. Well, we're getting ready to wrap up, but one more question before that, because I was just thinking about this. I see a lot of these roofs, they have these cap vents on the top of their ridges. So I can't imagine that's a good thing as far as when you're talking about a storm.
Yeah, ridge line vents, very particular to wind-driven rain intrusion, and it goes all the way across the house, like right in the middle, across from one wall to the other. It makes a water intrusion waterfall, and yeah, sometimes it's really bad on metal roofs if they're capped off incorrectly. Yeah, you've got a slick metal surface that water is just being rushed up that surface, and it goes right up into the attic. And yeah, we see it quite often, and it's devastating for sure.
So, and being, being the inspector, I know you are. I mean, that's kind of probably one of the things you're looking for up in those roofs, and whereas another inspector might go, yeah, it looks good to me. I mean, look, I've rehabbed enough houses to know what I'm looking for when I get into an attic.
Yeah, it's not enough for me to go up and say that it's vented great, but where are the wind baffles?
Right.
And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, they're optional, but they shouldn't be.
Right. No, 100%. Okay, we're going to wrap up this session. Rick, let's tell everybody how they can get a hold of you. And again, Rick is available for home inspections, whether you're buying. If you're selling, you may want a home inspection. I firmly believe before selling, because especially in this market may be changing. You don't want to get hit with a surprise, prior to closing. If you're trying to sell your house, you kind of want to know what's wrong with it, because these are going to be points of negotiation on a contract. So,
yeah, and if you have an older home, if nothing else, think about getting a 4-point done ahead of being asked for it, so that before you have a 10-day deadline to get all the stuff done that makes it insurable done. Because people always.
And I'm seeing this all the time. I'm seeing people scrambling
for sure, and then
and then getting hit with a $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 bill because they didn't have the foresight to take a look at the stuff prior in an offer.
So, we'd love to help homeowners. We help homeowners as much as we help buyers. So everybody out there can benefit from a great inspection to help people. We warranty everything. So you get covered for having spent the money on it. So you can't lose.
Yeah.
But you can get a hold of me anytime.
Tell everybody what a 4-point is real quick, because we use the term and some people out there might not.
Yeah, absolutely. The 4-point is what the insurance industry calls an inspection. It involves your electric, your plumbing, your air conditioning system, and your roof. Those are the 4 primary things that they pay money to. They want to know what is the condition of those things, and there's specifics they want to know about. And it's not an inspection that makes a lot of sense to a homeowner, but it makes all the difference in the world to what that rate is.
Absolutely. Rick, tell them your website. It's a great website. I've been to it many times.
Yep, tradesecretsinspections.com, and you can get me at 239-537-1186.
I imagine your email is rick@tradesecrets.com.
You got it.
Very good. Excellent. Okay, until our next episode. In the next episode, we're going to talk a little bit more about insurance inspections, if that's okay, Rick.
Sounds great.
Forms. We're going to talk about the wind mitt. We're probably going to get a little bit into the 4-point inspections and why all this stuff really matters to everyone, not if you're selling.
Yeah, people are getting caught off guard by this left and right, because it affects every homeowner in Florida at this point. If you haven't been woken up with the insurance letter yet, your time is coming.
Just a matter of time. Okay, Rick, thanks a lot, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Awesome. Thank you.